Making mistakes is very common. But, the effect of mistakes is not common. Research has shown that errors are responsible for more than 80% of failures and defects. So, every industry requires that particular method where mistakes are to be abolished completely, and that terminology is called Poka-Yoke, and that's the topic of today. Hello everyone, this is George from Invensis Learning. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Today's topic is Poka-Yoke tutorial for beginners. Now, without further ado, let us start the session. Now, let us take a look at the agenda. First, we shall start with knowing what a Poka-Yoke is. Then we shall focus on the origin of Poka-Yoke. Moving on, we shall see some of the everyday, automotive, and other common examples of Poka-Yoke. Moving on, we shall point out the characteristics of Poka-Yoke. Then, we shall see why Poka-Yoke is needed, and continue to understand some of the Poka-Yoke benefits. Moving on, we shall discuss various types of Poka-Yoke, and continue to learn its techniques. Next, we shall discuss 3 main rules of Poka-Yoke. Moving on, we shall talk about Poka-Yoke strategies. Then, we shall see what is the differences between Poka-Yoke and Kaizen. Then, we shall talk about when to use Kaizen, and continue to learn how to implement Poka-Yoke. Then, let us end the session by talking about digital Poka-Yoke. Now let us start the session by knowing what Poka-Yoke is. What is Poka-Yoke? Well, all of you guys would have seen USB wires. If the two ends were of the same size, it is difficult to identify which side is to be inserted to which end of the device. So, there are 2 different sizes present in the 2 edges of the USB. To make you understand even better, I can say that if both ends were of the same size, people would not identify which side of the plug to be inserted. Because of this, mistakes would occur. So, they thought of designing the 2 ends with different sizes, and people could easily recognize which side can be inserted into the mobile and which side to the charger point. So, this is what Poka-Yoke is about. Poka-Yoke is a Japanese term that means mistake proofing or error prevention. A poka is an inadvertent error and yokeru is Japanese for preventing, and was originally described as Poka-Yoke, which means foolproofing. A Poka-Yoke device is one that prevents incorrect parts from being made or assembled or easily identifies a flaw or error. It is used to prevent and resolve defects during the production process, eliminating the need for quality control after the process. Poka-Yoke methodology is a frequently used lean manufacturing and Six Sigma method to ensure as few errors in a production process as possible. This method makes it practically impossible to make mistakes. It forces actions to be carried out correctly, leaving no room for misunderstandings. It's about measures that prevent further errors from being made. Many solutions in Poka-Yoke tend to be simple, cheap, and effective. They can be integrated into the product design or in one of the process steps. Poka-Yoke ensures that the right conditions exist before a process step is executed, and thus preventing defects from occurring in the first place. This is not possible. Poka-Yoke performs a detective function, eliminating defects in the process as early as possible. Poka-Yoke is any mechanism in a lean manufacturing process that helps to avoid mistakes. Its purpose is to eliminate product defects by preventing, correcting, or drawing attention to human errors as they occur. Poka-Yoke is mainly used as 2 types. The first one is as control. In this type of Poka-Yoke, their main goal is to make it mechanically impossible for mistakes to be made. That means, they try to control the mistakes, as far as possible. For example, there is only one way you can plug a 3-prong electric cord into a power outlet. So, there is no chance of creating mistakes. Thus, errors are controlled. The next one is warning. Warning Poka-Yoke is performed when mistakes cannot be controlled in a human's hand. Here, in this type of Poka-Yoke, we try to detect the errors or mistakes, rather than controlling them. Color or sound is used as an alert operator, which helps the workers detect the mistake easily. For example, a buzzer sounds when the temperature of the coil is reaching its maximum limit. This indicates that a mistake may occur now. Thus, detection of mistakes or errors is done. Knowing about Poka-Yoke, let us now take a look into the birth of the Poka-Yoke. History of Poka-Yoke. The term Poka-Yoke was first introduced by Shigeo Shingo. He is a key contributor to the Toyota production system, TPS, in the 1960s. Shingo noticed that the workers often forgot to place a required spring under a switch button in the Toyota plant. Then, he thought about this. Then, he redesigned the process to be completed in 2 steps. The first step was to place the required springs in a placeholder. Second, must insert the springs into the switch. As a result, if a spring remained in the placeholder, it would be clear to the worker that they had forgotten to place it in the switch. Then, they could correct their mistake immediately. This process caused the birth of Poka-Yoke. It has probably been used here and there for a long time. Shigeo Shingo was on a quest to zero quality control, meaning to a situation where inspectors are no longer needed because quality issues are either prevented altogether or caught at the source. In simpler words, he builds quality in the process, rather than inspects quality out of it. Shingo wrote 2 books on this topic. Actually, he first wrote about Poka-Yoke, idiot proofing, in true Japanese manufacturing fashion. Then he changed the term to Poka-Yoke, avoiding inadvertent errors. After understanding the origin of Poka-Yoke, let us see some of its examples and understand its importance. Poka-Yoke examples. Poka-Yoke can be seen everywhere. It is a simple methodology that anyone can use. Now let us look into some of the examples of Poka-Yoke. Everyday examples. Many household appliances like microwave ovens, washing machines, and appliances will not function if the door is not closed. It has unique mechanisms that prevent them from running when the door is open. This is one example of Poka-Yoke. Another commonly used material in the house would be a hand wash sink. You guys would have seen that a hole is present inside the sink. But, what's the use of it? Well, this hole prevents the overflow of water whenever the leakage occurs and prevents the water dropout. Thus, it is a very good example of Poka-Yoke. The other examples of Poka-Yoke would be gas pumps with automatic shutoff nozzles, elevator electric eye to prevent the door from closing on people, lawnmower safety shutoff when the bar is released, car keys ground symmetrical to allow two-way insertion, barcodes for product identification during distribution. Poka-Yoke examples in automotive industries. Nowadays, vehicles can tell the distance and speed of other road users. This helps them prevent collisions in case of sudden stops, like umps, and sudden application of brakes. The device here is more of a warning and preventive measure. Cross-traffic alerts will warn drivers of impending traffic when they will reverse from a parking position. This is the best example of mistake proofing in the automotive sector. This device is more of a warning. The other common examples of Poka-Yoke are spell checking in dictionaries. The escalator moves only when it senses some obstacle. Treadmill safety keys. Different color bottles of sauces placed on a table in a restaurant. Use of color-coded data labels to mark the production dates of products. Pen with a retractable tip. Now, after seeing various Poka-Yoke examples, let us look into some of its characteristics. Characteristics of Poka-Yoke. The first characteristic of Poka-Yoke is, it is simple and cheap. By seeing the examples in the previous section of the video, you can easily say that Poka-Yoke is a very simple technique to implement for any industry. Next, Poka-Yoke is very easy to understand. There won't be any difficulty in understanding the concept, as well, when implementing this technique. Poka-Yokes are mainly designed to avoid mistakes. As the name says, it is a mistake-proofing technique that is used to abolish the mistakes that can occur in any process. The next feature of Poka-Yoke is that this is only placed where the mistake has occurred. It is unnecessary to change the whole system, only replacing the mistaken part, bringing the desired changes. Next, Poka-Yoke has no time bound. Any operator can use it at any point of the process. Thus, it can be used all time by the workers. The next feature is better quality. As per the discussion done till now, we have understood that Poka-Yoke is used to avoid the mistake. By doing this, the quality of the product is increased effectively. The main aim of Poka-Yoke is to detect, prevent errors. And this is done instantaneously. So, this becomes the next characteristic of Poka-Yoke. The next best characteristic of a Poka-Yoke system is that continuous inspection by the operators is not required. This is because, the result is obtained instantly and no need for inspection is required. Understanding the features of Poka-Yoke, let us continue the video by knowing the reasons to use Poka-Yoke. Why choose Poka-Yoke? The main purpose of the Poka-Yoke technique is to eliminate product defects by either preventing them in the first place, or by correcting them, or by drawing attention to human errors as soon as they occur. In manufacturing, this means not accepting, creating, or allowing defects to move down the line. Poka-Yoke is a safeguard that prevents a process from proceeding to the next step until the proper conditions have been met in the present step. Thus it detects and prevents mistakes. But, why mistakes are so critical? Mistakes cost money in sales, which hurts the bottom line. The levels are higher in different occupations, which purely depends on the criticality of that particular process. For example, an electrician, who makes a minor mistake, wrong connection, missing to fit a safety device, may cause serious emergencies that can lead to loss of life. Even if the errors or mistakes do not seem instantly serious, it may become a huge problem in the future. So, is necessary to have a Poka-Yoke. As noted in the HBR post, nothing compromises honesty as though it were a readily avoidable error, like, just think about Excel miscalculation, a misspelling about PowerPoint, or a lost email. Such minor mistakes may affect business relations, damage customer loyalty, or cost a company. Thus, Poka-Yoke is one serious aspect that must be present in any industries ranging from a small factory to big manufacturing industries. After knowing the reasons why to choose Poka-Yoke, we shall see its advantages. Benefits of Poka-Yoke. Poka-Yoke has many benefits to many processes. It is the foremost being an improvement in overall quality control used by many industries today. By integrating Poka-Yoke inline, mistakes are easily prevented and in turn produces a higher quality of output. Also, these solutions get to the root cause of problems and prevent them from becoming bigger problems in the future. Further, solving problems immediately takes significantly less time than trying to rework products when they've made it to the end of the line. Poka-Yoke encourages every individual's accountability for excellence as it does not require too much effort. The procedure performs 100% assessment. It presents immediate response, thus minimizing the time for remedial action, and also presents self-check actions that provide quicker review than consecutive verification. It eliminates defects and increases customer satisfaction by focusing on waste reduction in defects and processing. Also, applying Poka-Yoke in your factory can lead to a variety of other benefits, such as: the first advantage of Poka-Yoke is reduces waste. In general, the products manufactured with even minor mistakes are also considered defective pieces. By applying Poka-Yoke in your processes, you also save time by spending less time reworking defective products. Also, it also cuts down on the number of defects that need fixing. It's faster to fix a defect earlier rather than later. Hence, wastes get reduced. The next benefit is reduces time. Secondly, if no mistakes are present, then one step in the processes, that is, verification, is not necessary to be done. Since workers won't need to look out for as many problems, you won't need to spend as much time training them on these issues. Workers will need less training because the process they are now following will automatically correct any deviation from what is required. Next we have increases productivity. Your processes will function more smoothly when errors are prevented and defects are detected and solved immediately. Because of all these, more efficient processes and fewer waste results as an output. Thus, higher productivity can be seen. The next advantage is provides continuous improvement. Poka-Yoke is one of the improvement-oriented approaches. Quality-based work and continuous improvement become a way of life. Employees are encouraged to solve problems immediately and address the root cause of problems to prevent them from becoming bigger problems. It's a great tool to implement for many manufacturing industries. Then, we have provides safety environment. You can improve your factory's safety by putting measures in place to prevent workers from entering unsafe situations. Increase safety where work is done with hazardous materials or in risky conditions, such as working with electricity or petrochemicals. The next benefit is increases the quality of products. Confidence levels in the products are improved, because stakeholders know that the production process eliminates or radically reduces defects being produced. No defective items, or very few, are produced, thus reducing waste and costs. Quality checks by sampling and inspection can be reduced, because the elimination of mistakes is built into the process, either by prediction or by detection. The last advantage is found to be simple and inexpensive. Poka-Yoke is a highly useful quality management tool that can be implemented anywhere. Implementing this method doesn't need to be expensive, as it can help you avoid relying on human input, knowing that people do make mistakes. The primary goal of Poka-Yoke systems is to produce zero defects. Now, let us look into those three types of Poka-Yoke. Visual aid. The visual aid method helps by indicating directions for the job. There may be pictograms indicating a limit or a warning in a user manual or a street sign. An example of this type would be the traffic signs indicated on the road, which helps the drivers and pedestrians while walking on the road. Visual control. These apply to conduct direction and alarm in the event of deviations. For instance, traffic monitoring systems, where three colors are used to represent the movement of the vehicle. Failsafe. The failsafe method gives two options for the users, that is, yes or no. For example, a customer while purchasing the microwave would be asked whether he needs it with convection or not. Accordingly, they create the same way and give it to the customer. After knowing some of the types of Poka-Yoke, let us see various approaches to Poka-Yoke. Poka-Yoke Approaches. Poka-Yoke is used to produce a zero defect rate. There can be categorized into three methods. Contact method. In the contact method, The physical attributes measurements, like size, color, are done by using sensors. This type of mistake proofing is used in settings with environmental constraints such as inadequate illumination, poor visibility, critical temperature, etc. It is also a good method for circumstances where there is rapid repetition or intermittent production. When it comes to designing products, the contact method refers to adding asymmetrical appendages or modifying the part design to restrict the use of the product in only one orientation. An example of this method of Poka-Yoke can be seen at an ATM. The order of this transaction occurs as a result of trial and error. Before the user entered their card completed the screen interaction and the cash was supplied, then their card was returned. Inserting a USB into a system can have two directions, but Poka-Yoke helps you in showing the right way. The next method is fixed value method. When repetition of the same action is taking place multiple times, in this method, we fit a counting device that helps the operator keep an accurate count at all times. We fit a device that can control the number of actions, then this method of Poka-Yoke is used. For example, if an operator requires 4 bolts to assemble a component, he gets only 4 bolts in a box. Another example of this type of Poka-Yoke is the counters. This device counts the number of products that are passed through the device in the given amount of time. The last method would be motion step method. When any process includes a huge number of steps and there is a probability of skipping them by mistake, then one can use this motion stop method of Poka-Yoke. This prevents the operator from performing a step that is not part of the same process. The best example of a motion step method is a checklist. The operator is provided with a checklist with the tasks written in sequence, and the operator can complete a job in the right manner by following the checklist. Once the step gets ended, he or she can mark the checklist for future references. Another example would be color coding and tagging the completed things. This at the end highlights the completed tasks. Now that we know different Poka-Yoke approaches, let us various Poka-Yoke techniques. Poka-Yoke techniques. The most common type of human error in production is the failure to follow instructions for many reasons. Usually, workers skip the steps, using wrong tools and wrong parts are examples of why mistake proofing is critical in today's processes. Thus, Poka-Yoke brings various techniques to make sure none of these happen. When an employee shows a factory how a Poka-Yoke mistake proofing system can help them get rid of frequent mistakes, others usually focus on these techniques. Here, I have mentioned the main types of mistake proofing techniques. The first technique is designed for better efficiency. This means that the system must remove all the defects present in the product, and then produce a more quality product. The next technique is using sensors to prevent the processing of defective products. By making use of sensors, we can get to the defective parts of the products, and then it can be easy to remove all those which are found unnecessary. Next, we have vision system to rectify the abnormalities. It can be seen that the visual method is better than any other method in understanding a system. In the same way, if visual systems are used, one can easily identify the abnormalities. The next technique would be to use tool interlock to protect against recall liabilities. By doing easily, the safety of the devices is maintained. And industries can less fear about these tools and systems. The next technique is to prepare a checklist to outline steps. From this, one can easily understand how many steps can be completed in a process or a system. Next, we have creative solutions to avoid or detect errors. By doing this, elimination of defects can happen, and then directly leads to producing better quality products. The last technique of Poka-Yoke would be verification to avoid rework processes in manufacturing. It is better to verify and evaluate each process, so there will not be room for waste production. After knowing various techniques of Poka-Yoke, let us now see the 6 principles of Poka-Yoke. Principles of Poka-Yoke. Poka-Yoke is based on 6 principles. Here is the list mentioned in the order of preference. This can also be divided into 2 categories, that is, elimination, prevention, replacement, and facilitation can be implemented to prevent the occurrence of human error. Then, the other 2, detection and mitigation combined, are used to minimize the effects after the occurrence of human error. Now let us understand each of them in detail. The first principle is elimination. This is used to eliminate the possibility of error either by redesigning the product or process so that the task or part is no longer necessary. This means eliminating those processes or steps that cause more defects. So, if the process only is eliminated, the probability of errors is also reduced by the same amount. To tell you with an example, product simplification. Next, we have prevention. This principle is implemented to design the product or process so that it is impossible to make a mistake at all. The best example that suits this principle would be the plug-in socket. There is only one way of inserting the plug into a socket, thus preventing mistakes. The third principle is replacement. Here, it is recommended to use a substitute for a more reliable process to improve consistency. When one cannot reduce the defects produced by any process, it is better to replace it with another method, thereby reducing the number of errors. The best example of this can be automated. When human errors are more and difficult to reduce, one can use automation to reduce the same. Further, we have facilitation. Facilitation is a method to employ new techniques and combine steps to become easier to perform. Visual color aids will help the workers label or mark different parts to ensure that proper assembly is done. The fifth principle is detection. Detection is a method to identify an error before further processing occurs. This is done so that the user can quickly correct and solve the problem. An example of this principle would be that a light indicator is present in the machine, so it doesn't include more parts than required. Once it reaches the marked level, light is produced, and employees can detect it easily. And the last principle is mitigation. Here, it is to seek to minimize the effects of errors. This means mistakes are not avoided, but defects are minimized to a certain level. An example would be a stabilizer so that the machinery is protected from high/low voltage fluctuations. Knowing the principles of Poka-Yoke, let us see the rules that are to be followed in Poka-Yoke. Poka-Yoke Rules. Poka-Yoke is a golden term for many industries. It has made every organization increase its revenue and efficiency. But, how are all these possible? This is possible only because it follows 3 golden rules which have made it a universal factor today. Now, let us look into those 3 rules. The first one is: do not accept a defective piece. It would be a great difficulty for you to work when you are using a defective piece. Either you would be able to use them efficiently, or you cannot use them in processing as it does not give you the results which you are looking for. So, it is better to check the tools you are importing from the suppliers and make sure that it does not include defective items. The next rule is: don't make a defective product. It is a very good practice to make a proper product than a defective one. So, make sure that you are using proper implementation methods and creating products that are not defective. The last rule is: don't pass a defective product. As a good manufacturer, do not produce defective systems and do not export the same to the customers. By doing this, the loyalty of the customers also increases, and the demand for the product also increases. The other simple rules include: do not spend more. Make it easy and inexpensive. Do not use it as an option. Use the suitable method of Poka-Yoke. Aim for a quality process. After knowing the golden rules of Poka-Yoke, let us understand its strategies. Poka-Yoke Strategies. Poka-Yoke uses 3 strategies to make its work easy. Let us now look into those strategies. The first strategy is: make the product only when it is required. This is the main strategy any industry must follow, especially the manufacturing industries. It is very essential to make a product and produce it only when it has its demands. If not, it becomes a dead stock for the company itself. It may be sure that products will be taken sometime later, but still, the investment for that particular product will not be returning back at that time, and it becomes a dead capital for the industries. For example, the manufacturing of air conditioners will be in demand during the summer season. If the same is done during the winters, no customer will try to buy the same. The next strategy is: make the product so it cannot be used for anything else. This strategy is made to increase the demand of the product. As technology is increasing, people are getting adjusted to those new trends. Now people are smarter, they can use the same products in 2 ways and make their work easier. For example, a USB cable is used for charging and data sharing and transferring, etc. So, it is better to make a product which can perform one work in an efficient way. An example of this would be a keypad, which can only be used to type, and for nothing else. The last strategy is: use the product once it is ready. This strategy mainly tells that, if the product is ready, use it immediately. Because of this, work becomes easier, and others also try to use this, and a great demand for this product can be seen. If this is not done, quality and the demand for the products reduce. Now that you know about the strategies of Poka-Yoke, it is time to know the difference between the most 2 common terms, Poka-Yoke and Kaizen. Difference between Poka-Yoke and Kaizen. Often, people have heard both these terms, but as they sound different, they also mean differently. Kaizen and Poka-Yoke, Both originated from the Toyota Production System, TPS. But, you might be wondering, how are they different from each other? Now, let us explore the difference between Kaizen and Poka-Yoke. Kaizen is a Japanese word that translates to improving the bad points or making them better. In fact, Kaizen's philosophy focuses on changing for the better which cannot be accomplished without continuous improvement. It is a change in mindset which helps people understand and realize their true potential and improve themselves. On the other hand, Poka-Yoke is another term that was born in Japan at Toyota only. This mainly focuses on zero quality control. Zero quality control is a method of correcting and preventing any possible defects in production using a combination of Poka-Yoke techniques. Also, they differ in the principles they follow. Kaizen mainly deals with continuous improvement, whereas Poka-Yoke deals with mistake proofing. Similarly, Kaizen implements small changes for improving efficiency and productivity, whereas Poka-Yoke tries to reduce the errors and mistakes to perform the same. While performing Kaizen, every employee ranging from CEO to the assembly workers are involved, but Poka-Yoke only involves management-level employees. Poka-Yoke mainly tries to reduce human errors wherever they could occur. This actually means that there is a need for it in practically every industry. Every solution it offers is different. We can prevent such mistakes by using a set of guidelines that can help us to perform possible solutions. But before we get to these guidelines, let's see when and where can Poka-Yoke really make a difference to our processes and products. When to use Poka-Yoke. Poka-Yoke can be implemented at any point in any industry. It is just not used in factories, but can also be implemented in many areas like the workplace, home life, etc. But it is quite important in the manufacturing process, because a single mistake can ruin the whole system. Ideally, this technique is used when a process or product is likely to have an error or may go wrong. Here are some situations where it would be particularly important to mistake-proof. When a minor error early in the process may cause major problems in later stages of the process. At a handoff step in a process, when output has been transferred to another worker. When the consequences of an error are expensive or dangerous. During the assembling phase, the employee may forget to insert a part that should be in the final assembly. When faulty memory can cause an employee to miss a process step. Here are some of the common types of errors that can occur in any manufacturing process, and Poka-Yoke has to be implemented to avoid these errors. Missing a process operation or not performing the processes according to the standard operating procedure, processing errors. Not including all the parts assembly, welding, or other processes missing parts. Setting machine adjustments wrongly or using the wrong tooling to set up the machine's setup errors. Errors that happen in production when a wrong measurement causes a machine breakdown or stoppage of production, production error. Failing to use the right parts in a process, improper parts/items. Taking measurements wrongly in a process, machine adjustment, or the dimensions of a part coming from a supplier, measurement error. Performing an operation incorrectly or having the incorrect version of the standard operating procedure, operations errors. Now that we know when to use Poka-Yoke, let us discuss how to use Poka-Yoke. How to implement Poka-Yoke. Poka-Yoke is a technique that aims in preventing mistakes or at least minimizing them down to acceptable levels. It is based on the philosophy that human error cannot be completely abolished no matter what one does, while on the other hand, it's also impossible to prevent mistakes arising from other reasons, so it doesn't make sense to put any effort into trying to fight against those kinds of mistakes. There are different details to how Poka-Yoke should be implemented in an organization, and studying it in full detail is recommended for every professional in the organization. There are a few things that to consider while implementing the Poka-Yoke techniques and methodology. Firstly, the factory or manufacturing industry must have enough resources and support for implementing the Poka-Yoke procedures and other devices. Next, they must ensure that proper training is done for all those employers regarding the new technologies they need to implement. Select the process. Choose one particular process you want to evaluate. The selection could be either based on the overall impact it has on the company's key performance indicators, KPIs, or the complexity of the process, or maybe depending on the frequency of errors. But, try to select a process that needs a significant chance for improvement. Identify the error in the process. So, in this step, you will have to identify the error. There are several modes of error detection methods that are used by Poka-Yoke. So, it's important to realize that choosing the right one can make all the difference in the results you see. Sometimes, it is possible that there is no presence of error, and you may find the wrong one. Because, certain modes of detection will not even suit the context of the way a specific part works, so you'll need to put some kind of research into that aspect of Poka-Yoke's implementation in your business. Map the process by identifying the risk. To do this, it is better to be in a team and then start the implementation process. So, sit with your team, review each step in the process flow chart. If you do not have a process flow chart, create one. Then, check for any areas where defects have occurred in the past or have a high potential to occur. Next, brainstorm all the possible errors that could occur within the process. Then, try to resolve them. Outline your options. Now that you've identified those errors, brainstorm ways to make it impossible for those errors to occur. You can do this by simplifying the steps so the action is simpler to perform than the error to occur, eliminating the step by asking if it is necessary and adds value, and implementing Poka-Yoke to make it impossible to create an error during the step. Ensure that proper procedure is happening. So far, you detected errors in your processes with relatively good accuracy. So, now it's equally important to ensure that there are appropriate procedures in place for working around those issues, and resuming the normal workflow. Sometimes companies pay too little attention to that and so no proper implementation takes place. So, it is better to study how your processes work and figure out the most appropriate way to deal with each type of issue so that your workers are prepared when the time comes. Then, it's time to choose the best Poka-Yoke method for the process. This means collectively deciding on the contact, fixed value, or motion step method of Poka-Yoke. Implement a system. Develop and select the Poka-Yoke device or method and implement it into the existing process. Ensure that operators are aware of the changes being made and how they will be affected. And of course, it's also important to ensure that you gain some valuable knowledge and experience from those situations where you run into errors. And then, you'll obviously also need to make sure that this information gets properly used and doesn't just end up in some random archive. Verification. Last but not least, you will have to make sure that you have a good overview of how things are flowing on the most fundamental level. Over time, measure the effectiveness of the change by monitoring efficiency, error reduction, rework and scrap. Get as much input as you can from the employers who run your operations, and consult them on what types of errors they most frequently run into and other similar factors. You may sometimes gain valuable insights into the way your operations run just this discussion, and this knowledge can show you better ways to figure out when errors are coming up in your production processes. After understanding the implementation process of Poka-Yoke, let us talk about digital Poka-Yoke. Digital Poka-Yoke. Poka-Yoke is a mistake-proofing method. With digital technology, one can easily introduce the Poka-Yoke concept, digitize Poka-Yoke steps, and enhance user adoption with mobile capabilities. Using digital Poka-Yoke will help enhance workers' acceptance and benefit them in various ways. Hence, digitizing the Poka-Yoke will lead you to better efficiency and quality. The HBR study says that one of the most significant lean technique features might be the no-frills of Poka-Yoke, a realistic solution to avoiding errors or identifying them instantly. It is one of the most valuable takeaways that has become one of the most powerful work standardization techniques. This can be applied to any manufacturing or service-based industry. Its main idea is to prevent errors and defects from appearing in the first place is universally applicable and has proven to be a true efficiency booster. After understanding the importance of Poka-Yoke, now is time to get a certification and upskill yourself. We can help. At Invensis Learning, we provide live online Poka-Yoke certification training course. Visit the Invensis Learning website to know more about this.